Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about our new unit, which is about the rise of industry or industrialization, the Industrial Revolution, sometimes known as the Gilded Age, which is from about 1865 to 1900, 1920. And we'll be talking about an important trend that usually occurs after a war, like the Civil War, in which a revolution really will occur of new ideas and inventions that transforms the United States. This industrial revolution after the Civil War really proceeded at an explosive pace. It brought enormous changes that affected almost every aspect of American life. And so we're going to be talking about several factors regarding industrialization. For example, the forces that enabled the United States to emerge as a leading industrial power. What did we have going for us? What about workers? Where did we get the workers? How were workers affected by industry? How did this growth of people, of population, lead to urbanization, lead to the growth of cities? What problems were found in cities? What positives were found in cities? And, of course, importantly, to understand the factors that led to immigration. So those are some of the essential questions. And as always, I encourage you to write down not just what you see, but also what I say. So as you're taking the notes, you want to be using that 3/4, 1/4 process in your notebook, and not just write down the topics and the vocab and the definitions that I've got, but write down what I say as well. So let's look at how did American business and industry grow. I'm going to have you think back to your global information and understand too that the British actually had a much earlier industrial revolution back in the mid-1700s, and we actually had a little mini industrial revolution in the early 1800s. There were some new inventions, new ideas. There was the growth of transportation, certainly a market revolution, the growth of roads and canals, turnpikes, waterways, certainly making markets easier to get to and meeting people's needs. However, the real growth that took place after the Civil War began in the North. And so we're going to find that the North is going to be the place that has more of the elements that are necessary for industrial growth from 1865 to about 1920. And one of the things that America has is a lot of land. That's true of the North and the South, but the North certainly made use of railroads. And so when the railroad system was opening up, this transcontinental railroad, the one that went all the way across the United States, really opened up the West and offered so much land, not just for people to settle, but for businesses to look for raw materials, for markets. That was key. And so you have the land, there's your first element. You have your labor, and that is through workers. We had a lot of people already living in the United States, but add to that this growth of immigration, people looking for jobs. There's your second element, the labor. You have land and labor, and we also have the capital. We had the money in the banks and the people, the entrepreneurs that we're going to talk about, that really made it clear that we had all the elements for a very strong industrial revolution. So the Industrial Revolution really was producing goods not by hand anymore, not in your home, but in a factory using machines. So I would write that down, that the Industrial Revolution went from homemade to factory made, from handmade to machine made. And we had a great amount of water power, especially in the north, or steam power, steam engines, that would power machines in the factories, that allowed manufacturers to produce more goods for less money. And as goods become cheaper, the demand increases, and that creates more jobs. And as a result, cities grow because people are moving into them in order to find this work. So I'll say that again. The water or steam power powers the machines in factories, allows the manufacturers to produce more goods for less money, and as goods become cheaper, the demand increases, creating more jobs. Cities grew as people moved into them in order to find work. So that's kind of how the modern industrial economy emerges, especially after the Civil War. And you see with that transcontinental railroad begins to link the east and the west coast, and the railroads connected the raw materials to the factories and the factories to the consumers throughout the entire nation. This construction of the railroads stimulates the iron, the steel, the coal industries, and it plays a key role in the settlement of the West. So that is around 1869, 1870. So that's right after the Civil War. And we know that in the South, economically, the South is a little bit stunted. Still remains largely agricultural after the Civil War, and that's fine. The technology is going to grow in terms of roads, canals, railroads, factories, but the vast majority of the South is still going to be focused on plantation lifestyle, freed African Americans who are working as sharecroppers and tenant farmers. And that's important as well. Now, here are some important business organizations that you need to write down. And I'm sure a lot of these you already know the meanings of. There just should be a reminder for you as to how the development of business take place, new forms of business organizations. So corporate forms of business become very popular. And so you're going to need to understand some of these words because this is the way that you would understand business. Capital simply means money for investment. That's what capital means. Or anything that you could turn into money, anything you could sell for money. A corporation is a company that issues shares to investors or to stockholders. And that makes each stockholder a partial owner. The stockholders share in the company's profits in the form of dividends. Corporations became very widespread because of the large amount of money they could raise. They could raise a lot of capital in a very short amount of time. Monopoly, you know, is a company that has complete control over a particular field of business. It's not just the game. They control everything. A conglomerate is a company that owns a group of unrelated companies, kind of creating a much bigger set of companies that can run many different types of companies, different industrial or retail companies. A pool, not a place to swim, but a company within one field that agrees to set prices and divide business. This is illegal today because you can't set prices and then divide up the business so that consumers don't have anywhere else to go. And a trust. A trust is very similar to a monopoly. It's a group of corporations in the same field that agree to combine and then do what a pool does, set the prices and divide the business. And next we'll be talking about some of the important entrepreneurs of the time period. And these entrepreneurs are the people who are setting the pace for industrialization. And I'm just looking to see if I'm going to have time to be able to do that, or if we're going to run out of time. I think we're just going to keep going. I'm going to try to get past this section here. Entrepreneurs are those people who brought these factors, the land, the labor, and the capital together to create large businesses. And they played a very important role in the rise of industry. They were people who understood how to make their businesses efficient. They could use this large-scale manufacturing production, and through that could actually not just make the goods, but lower the prices of goods, making them more affordable. Entrepreneurs sometimes can be seen as good in ways, but also very bad. And so we'll talk about them being almost schizophrenic, if you will. Sort of robber barons on one hand, and yet captains of industry on the other. So these are people who will take the responsibility for the organization and the operation of a new business venture. They'll risk a large amount of their own capital sometimes, and also capital in the forms of corporations and stocks. And they hope to use this money, this capital, to make more money, to make enormous profit. So here's some people you've already probably talked about and learned about. Andrew Carnegie works his way up from being a penniless Scottish immigrant to become one of America's richest men. He had steel mills, but he ruthlessly undercut all competition. His workers put in 12-hour shifts at very low wages. He crushed any worker attempts to unionize, but on the good front, he gave millions to charity, and you've probably heard of the Carnegie Foundation anytime you watch PBS. Another famous guy is John D. Rockefeller, who formed Standard Oil Company in around the 1870s. Rockefeller forced railroad companies to give him special secret rates for shipping his oil, while they charged his competitors higher prices. He, as well, just like Carnegie, might have been seen as a not-so-nice guy. However, he gave millions to charity as well. And both of these men helped to support, medicine, libraries, the fine arts, schools, education. So you would question their tactics, and in the end would say they did something good for the United States by giving a lot of their money away, and their money is still growing even today. Henry Ford, we know, is an important entrepreneur by revolutioning the auto industry, not by creating a car, but creating the assembly line and all types of mass production techniques. And then J.P. Morgan, a very famous banker, a railroad entrepreneur. He dabbled in electricity, insurance, shipping. He eventually buys U.S. Steel from Andrew Carnegie when he's ready to sell in 1901. So, he had a lot to do with all types of businesses and industries and developing a national market. So, creating an industrial revolution takes land, it takes labor, it takes capital. And the capital is coming from these entrepreneurs who are smart enough, rich enough, and have enough connections to create companies that will not only dominate one particular industry, but will dominate most of American life. So this is one way that we can understand the Industrial Revolution, understand this time period as being known as the Gilded Age, and we will talk more about that at a later point. So I wish you luck on your notes. Please feel free to stop these along the way. Go back and, rewrite the notes a little bit, especially what I'm saying, not just what you see, but what I'm saying. And feel free to make comments in your notes or ask questions in your notes, and we'll talk about them in class. Okay? I hope you are doing well, and I will see you in class. Have a great night.